This is Weights and Wealth, your one-stop shop for entertaining education on building a stronger body and bank account.
We are not doctors or financial advisors and must warn you this is not medical or investing advice. It is for your entertainment.
Welcome back to Weights and Wealth. Nick, you want to give us a shout out?
The shout out is Jack from Charleston. He's a committed listener of the podcast and he always gives us great feedback.
Thank you, Jack.
Hell yeah, Jack.
The weights wisdom of this week, I'm going to steal from the muscle doc, Dr. Jordan Shallow. It's one of the earliest things you learn in a prescript course, which is the muscle doc's company. But if you can't stand on one leg, you shouldn't squat on two. And really, the essence of this is that you need to be able to do unilateral exercises and show that you have stability before you really have the right to do bilateral compound movements. So if you can't stand on one leg, start doing some unilateral exercises.
Very nice. I started squatting, so that guy's full of it. No. No, that's good advice. That's good advice. But speaking of like basics and like how things start properly, you know, we figured we'd talk a little bit about like
transition. Gotta say
a little bit of talk about like how the modern financial system started, and that was with really like, I mean, if you want to go back, like maybe like Assyrians in, you know, the Fertile Crescent, like trading, you know, one guy's holding your wood, the other guy holds your wheat and stuff like that, kind of bartering. But in a somewhat modern financial system with currency, it was the Knights Templar in the 12th century. They were kind of the Western Union of medieval Europe.
Yeah, you're going.
So they started out by essentially funding the Crusades, and you know, in 1099 they took Jerusalem, and a lot of the different like expeditions and stuff like that, they had to carry a lot of money to buy supplies, food. Some of them even had to like commission shipbuilders in Southern Europe to build ships to get across the Mediterranean. So they were carrying a large amount of money, which made them obviously a very large target for, you know, any type of like robber or hostile force. So what it started as was Crusaders, particularly in London, would drop off like their money at the Templars' temple in London, and then they would be able to redeem it in Jerusalem once they reached there. So they would carry like a letter of credit that showed, you know, ex-nobleman, like Robert the Bruce. He didn't go on a crusade, but example nobleman deposited, you know, 500 pounds worth of gold at, you know, this date at this time. There's not much known about like the exact financial way of tracking it. I don't know if they had tracking numbers or serial numbers or however they did it, but once he reached Jerusalem, he would be able to go withdraw his funds from the bank in Jerusalem. And this went on for probably the next 200 to 300 years until the Christians were kicked out of the Holy Land. And then that's when most people start to think of conventional banking with the Medicis and other Italian banking families.
I was going to say, that's what we always learned in school, was banking really started with the Medicis.
Well, that's because public school hates God. So, but if anyone asks, it's the modern financial system was really started by the Knights Templar.
And that's interesting also because it sounds like the Knights Templar had a very international system of banking, whereas the Medicis started just in these little city-states at first in Italy.
Oh yeah, I mean it was primarily like a protective service. You know, they evolved. That's one of the reasons they're like the Templars, and then you had the Hospitallers as well, because they were originally just religious orders that, you know, were taking care of the poor, and, you know, Templars were founded to protect the Temple Mount, you know, like all these sacred sites in Jerusalem, and the Hospitallers were founded to like give aid to the wounded and to help the sick and stuff like that. But as, you know, the conflicts between East and West kept heating up, they slowly became militarized and started taking on these larger roles because it's a very harsh and unforgiving environment. You know, they were kind of like the Green Berets, but also the Wall Street of. So like if you combined like Chris Kyle with the Wolf of Wall Street, but made them like holy and devout, that's basically what the Knights Templars were. They had the best of everything. So, you know, shout out the Knights Templar. But going on into this, you know, we talked about, you know, the origins of banking and the origins of squatting. We might as well talk about, like, you know, why believe in God, you know,
origins of the universe, I guess.
Origins of the universe, you could say. That's kind of the focus of this episode is, you know, all of us are Christian, Catholic, believing in kind of the Western faith tradition. But this episode primarily focuses on what are the reasons to believe in a higher power. That could be a wide variety of reasons. Like, we're not necessarily going to go into like a specific faith, but or the pros and cons even of, like, you know, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, various like pagan ones like Wiccan, stuff like that. There's tons and tons and tons of different religions out there, all that point to a higher power that, you know, has influence in the origin of the universe, in sometimes our day-to-day lives. Sometimes, you know, you can even be like a deist, like many of, you know, people in colonial times, where they believe that God does exist. It's like a step beyond agnostic, where they believe God exists. God is real, like we're right about him, like we kind of know what's going on, but he doesn't care and he doesn't influence day-to-day operations.
Yeah, even like within Christianity, we have disagreements, but this isn't going to be from a Christian viewpoint. It's just going to be what is a good argument for there being a God? Yeah,
like what is the logical why believing in a higher power is a more like fleshed out and like logical and more seriously intellectual position than believing in the lack or the absence of God. Because even an agnostic is a more intellectually honest position, from what I understand, saying like, I don't know if there is a God, or like, you know, so like, I'm not going to go either way.
Should one of us take the atheist stance on this for like a devil's advocate kind of
argument? I mean, I think it's good to like bring it up, be like, hey, like, you know, based on this, you know, blah, 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 blah. It's important to give that airtime. But like, if you really think about it, like, yes, you can come up with logical reasons why God exists. You can come up with logical reasons why God doesn't exist. But most of the time, like those, like, they kind of boil down to like, if big man in sky, why bad things happen to good people? You know, that's like the majority.
All right, so we'll just have a discussion
like,
here, and then we'll inject some of the atheist counter arguments, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's important to hear them. But it's important to like understand that you have to be able to see both sides. And if you're really being honest with yourself, both of them are, you know, take as much faith as, you know, it takes faith to not believe in God and to believe in God.
Let's start there. It takes faith to believe in nothing. All right. So let's start with atheist viewpoint. Big Bang Theory. Either one of you can, Nick, maybe you want to start on this. All right. So the universe started from the Big Bang, right? Tiny ball of matter and energy exploded, and that's why the universe keeps expanding. It had all that energy that exploded outwards, and we know that physicists say the universe is still expanding.
I mean, I don't necessarily think that's solely an atheist viewpoint. I think it is compatible with believing in God and the Bible as well, even though this isn't from a Christian viewpoint. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know we're not going from the Christian lens, but like in my eyes, when it, like let there be light, that's kind of what a Big Bang would have looked like.
But even that, like the very name of it, Big Bang Theory, that's like its Achilles heel. It hasn't gotten to the stage in like scientific evidence to reach a law of science. It's still only a theory. Like there is not enough physical evidence to prove it. It contradicts multiple like basic laws of physics in the universe that we know. Like what is the opposite and equal reaction that occurred for the Big Bang to happen? You know what I mean? That has to happen from basic laws of physics that apply here and in space, as we know, because we have achieved interstellar travel. So we know that the laws of physics also apply in space. So what is this equal and opposite reaction that occurred?
You're saying something can't come from nothing.
Yes.
So how that's compatible with and why there's good evidence that there's a God is because God is eternal, right? So if God doesn't have a start point, right? God is out. I gotta stop saying right. Alex got on me for this earlier. So
say left instead.
Yeah, I'll say left instead from now on. So God's eternal, outside of space and time. Therefore, he doesn't have a beginning. So he can create the universe, and nothing created God. God's eternal. He's outside space and time. If you choose to believe in the Big Bang Theory and there not being a God, the universe just exploded. But what started it?
Yeah, like
there has to be there. Every cause has to have, every beginning has to have a cause.
Yeah, I mean, that's equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah. Wait. So do you think that the universe has always existed, or that it came
God
into being
has always
at
existed.
a point? Okay.
God has always existed.
Okay.
God created the universe, as you were pointing out in the creation story in Genesis. If you look at it from a Christian viewpoint, right, that somewhat describes what the Big Bang Theory tries to put out there, even though
Though it leaves out a critical part where it's like, okay, well, yes, maybe there is evidence, or at least like the way that like we're interpreting the evidence seems to point to, there being this rapid expansion of, life across the universe very, very quickly, some sort of like cosmic explosion that happened, but still something had to have triggered that. And what is that thing? And most theists will argue that it was a higher power. Which is why I generally seem to think that it's a more logical position, because even if like you're like trying to go full science, full like hard science all the time, like the involvement of a higher being, even if it's not like the Christian God as we think of it, or the Islamic God, or like Vishnu or something, there is an outside force that created that action that therefore created the universe.
And this is what's funny to me about the atheist argument for the Big Bang is, to me, if you look at it intellectually, it takes more faith from the atheists to believe that something came out of nothing than that God created something.
Yeah, it's a larger gap. It's a bigger logical jump to say nothing created something than God, this omniscient, omnipotent being that is outside our current universe. Maybe God is a extra dimensional being that
it's outside space and time. It's another dimension
that is somehow doing that. And we're not arguing for the existence of Jesus Christ himself, but simply this higher power.
Well, in this episode.
Yes, in this episode, yes.
I think we hammered this point. Nick, would you like to introduce a second point?
Like the contingency theory.
Sure.
I mean, like you kind of mentioned it, but everything has to have a cause, or at least that's what the principle of sufficient reason says. Like, that's why we have the scientific method. Like, we think that things have an explanation, and it can't just go backwards in perpetuity. Like, there has to be some outside force that caused that first thing to happen. You can't just say this was caused by this, and like that can't just go back forever. Like, something has to cause the original thing to happen. Mm-hmm. So does that make sense?
Yeah, every beginning has a cause.
Yeah.
It's the easiest way to, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense. I mean, that's kind of what we were talking about with the Big Bang Theory. Like, it all comes back to like we were kind of talking about the flaws in the Big Bang Theory, but contingency theory is like, okay, well, if A goes to B and B goes to C, well, you're going to get to the end of the alphabet somehow. And it's generally called the omega.
Another point to me is it appears to me as though there's an intelligent design in the universe. If you look at the second law of thermodynamics, entropy increases, right? So chaos basically increases. Order doesn't typically increase. So when you look at things that are ordered so incredibly and things that are designed so incredibly, to me, it appears as though there's a creator with intelligent design. Does that, you guys?
I understand what you're saying. And in some ways, like, couldn't you argue that like the chaos of the universe, like if we're talking about like evolution, for example, we have evolved into like a more precise being over time, which is in some ways order increasing, which to me would also point to like intelligent design because the world is becoming less chaotic as beings evolve and become more in control of their actions. You know, like if we actually went from apes or from a fish at the bottom of the ocean all the way up to sentient, intelligent human beings, I would argue that that is an example of order increasing in the universe, which requires intelligent design. Do you understand my chain of reasoning?
Yeah, there? Yeah. And I think if you look at the way things are structured, if you look at DNA, it appears to me as though that is intelligently designed. It didn't just happen by chance. I think that some things are way too complex to be just randomly by chance, coincidentally happening over time.
Yeah. And I mean, going across that, I mean, there's a lot of things throughout the world, not just evolutionarily, but like on a societal level, like natural law, like throughout the entire world, from Sentinel Island to Washington, D.C. to Baghdad, you know, you have these certain human laws that are universal, like do not murder, like do not cover your children, do not cover your neighbor's wife, like you don't mess with another dude's girl, like you don't steal, you don't kill, you don't commit adultery, like yeah, maybe they're polygamous and you have multiple wives, or maybe like some tribes or some cultures may have like a more explicit corporal punishment and stuff like that. But there are generally these like hard and fast rules.
Universal
moral law, which, considering the diversity of cultures and religions and just attitudes across the world, I would say that would argue, or that argues to me, that there is some sort of larger common denominator that all human beings share that otherwise we wouldn't. Because I mean,
an atheist argument for that is that the universal moral law comes from survival and evolution, right? So you don't want to kill other people because that decreases the population and lessens chance of survival. But I think that's incorrect, because within universal moral law, everyone still agrees you shouldn't rape people, right? But that rape technically would vastly increase population and thereby survival, according to that argument. So I think universal moral law is separate from just increasing the population or keeping people safe so that the species can continue. And because of that, again, it would appear to me, just thinking through that and thinking through what would break universal moral law under that case, that we have a creator that instilled the universal moral law within all of us.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, well, couldn't you also argue like that just comes from, because like humans have empathy, like, you know, I wouldn't want to be in that position, so like we should just have a general rule that, like, I don't want that happening to me, so yeah.
Why do we have love if we weren't created by a higher power, right? What is beneficial about love?
It's kind of a liability, survival-wise, to be honest.
Because you can have other animals that reproduce but don't exhibit love, right? So why do we as humans have love? How is that beneficial to us? Oftentimes can be counterproductive to survival.
Dude, that's true. I mean, as far as like raising kids goes, I think it's fairly important.
Not for some animals, though.
Not for all, but I mean, I guess you could say that's something that's more. Well, I mean, it's not even unique to human beings, right?
No,
like there are other animals that mate for life.
That's true. Yeah.
Relatively rare.
Yeah,
but it does happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not making that case. It was just a point that popped in my head.
But like then you can get into the arguments of where do love and consciousness come from? Mm-hmm. Right? How were they created? I think love and consciousness both speak to a higher power that created us in his image.
I'd agree with that because, I mean, that's the whole point of free will. You know, it's like God made us in his image and gave us free will to choose to love him because he saw that as of higher value than, you know, the cows in the field grazing. Like, yes, they worship him every day. The sparrows singing in the trees praise him every day. But they just do that because that's in their nature. They don't choose to do it. That's what they do. It's like me and you breathing. It's like Ted smelling bad. It's kind of just it's what happens, you know. But by giving us consciousness, the free will to choose to love, that is like why human beings are, you know, as they said in Genesis, to rule the seas and like all the land and like all the animals are like subject to you because you were on a higher level.
Entrusted with stewardship.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't want to keep taking the opposing viewpoint.
No, go for it. I was doing it too. It's helpful to introduce the counter argument. So.
Yeah.
On the consciousness subject, I mean, I think that humans, like we have AI now, right? Mm-hmm. Like we're fairly close to being able to produce something that can like think for itself. Now, whether or not that will actually have feeling, I don't know if we'll be able to actually know that. But I mean, like, I feel like we are close to being able to like produce something that has consciousness, right?
So we're close to being able to produce something that can essentially like think for itself, mm-hmm. right? With how fast the chips can work and everything. But to this day, scientists still don't know what exactly consciousness is.
Yeah.
Right?
Like the
neuroscientists.
I mean, it's being like self-aware, isn't it?
Yeah, but like neuroscientists still don't understand how consciousness happens.
Or like, so like,
brain.
Why am I me?
Yeah.
Kind of like, why was I in this body as opposed to.
Yeah, or just how consciousness works. They don't understand how it's connected to the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's something entirely separate, which you could argue is the existence of a soul.
Yes, yeah. Which gets us into like a spiritual dimension, mm-hmm. which... Going back to the first argument, there's a dimension outside space and time, which is where God is.
Why are you here doing a podcast on yellow leather chairs in East Charleston with soggy socks? You know, like there's all sorts of like very existential questions you have to ask yourself just like that.
Do you want to introduce Pascal's wager?
Yeah, I mean, so that's like a very, very basic thing. And like I remember when I was I might have been in like fourth grade, and we were like, I think we had just finished like a theology class, and I went up to my mom and I basically came up with my own version of Pascal's wager. She was like, "Oh, well, that's Pascal's wager. Like, where did you read that?" I was like, "Oh, I didn't read that. I thought I came up with this brilliant argument all by myself." But no, it was like Pascal came up with it back in, you know, the Middle Ages. And essentially what it boils down to is that, you know, it's like those graphs where it's like, you know, high probability or like, you know, it's like 1, 2, 1, 2. Like if this happens and this happens, then this happens. I'm just blanking out what it's called.
Wait, it's like the probability and then the severity. So
yeah, it's something like that.
The matrix of those.
Yeah,
two.
It's like essentially a matrix. So it's like if you believe in God and you live your life according to his laws, that according to whatever faith tradition you're in, he gave to you. So, you know, if you're a Sikh or if you're Hindu or Catholic or Baptist or whatever, if you live according to those laws and you die, and then nothing's there, what did you lose?
The worst.
You probably lived a good life. If you deny the existence of God throughout your entire life and ignore all those laws, and then you die and nothing's there, maybe you were more profitable in business, and you maybe but most likely you just probably were kind of a D-bag. You probably weren't a very nice person. But let's say you do that, and then God is there. Now you've lost all of eternity. Whereas if you were the Christian and you lived your life according to God's law and nothing's there, you didn't lose anything, but you lived a good life. If he is there, now you have eternal reward. So it's kind of like you might as well. It's not a very intellectually rigorous argument. It's kind of like a
fourth grade could come up with it.
Yeah,
I know. So but it is really what do you have to lose? You might as well just be a good person and be like, hey, I'll give you a chance. Every faith and every person doubts at some point. Just because you have doubts doesn't mean he's not there. It doesn't mean he doesn't exist. So it's like doubting Thomas is one of the greatest saints in the Catholic Church. You get to touch Christ's wounds. He's one of the apostles. So doubt is something that will fill you.
Doubt is actually an essential part of faith, because if you have 100% faith and no doubt infinitely throughout your entire time here, then that means you have 100% proof, right? When you doubt that you grow, I think. And that's kind of in this episode where we're giving the other arguments, you grow by analyzing other viewpoints and other arguments when you're debating.
That's faith and reason.
Yeah.
Those are the key tenets of any rigorous theological tradition. Is you have to apply logic and common sense to everything and thoroughly analyze your faith tradition so you understand it, so that you not only understand what you believe, but why you believe it. So that's what so many people struggle with, especially today, whether it's politics, theology, economics, sociological causes. They're I believe X because everyone else is saying it. And, they get that, that Newsmax or CNN just blurb that they heard one time, or they read a tweet about it and it made them really mad, or heard it on a podcast. Yeah. But they don't fully understand it. It's like the Israel-Palestine stuff, or BLM, everyone's posting black squares, or, the Israel-Palestine stuff, everybody's got an Israeli flag or a Palestine flag. But how many of them actually understand the origins of that conflict? That's a shout out to Martyr Made with Daryl Cooper. You need to listen to it. It's Fear and Loathing in New Jerusalem. One of the best podcasts I've ever listened to. It's 24 hours worth of in depth, literally starting from I think it's 1801 when the first Zionist settlers returned. There's always been Jewish presence in the Holy Land, but when this movement really first started, he goes through the intellectual beginnings, the political origins, why was the British Empire backing them, and why did the U.S. come in, infighting within the Jewish groups. Most people don't know that there was a Jewish fascist group that modeled themselves after Mussolini that ran Jerusalem for a decade. In the lead up to World War II. There's just so much stuff that people don't understand about these very, very complex issues, and they just recite something that they heard, so they don't know. They know what they believe, they know the side that they're on, but they don't really know why. And I think that is one of the most important things. I don't necessarily care what you believe. You can take anything. You can say that tanks can fly, or I don't know, any other ridiculous argument. But as long as you really think it out, I'll hear you out, and I want to learn.
Yeah.
I think most people aren't intellectually honest enough with themselves to really go into it and be like, holy crap, I really don't understand this at all. And I need to go read 24 books on this subject from each side to actually understand it.
Do we have any closing thoughts on why God exists?
I don't think so. You have anything else?
No.
I think I hit everything that I was thinking.
Yeah, but I mean, like, so for the future, like, we will be going into like more like detailed like faith traditions, and I can't wait to like box Ted's ears in about Martin Luther and all those dorks. But it is. I think if you take anything away from this episode, focus on your why, and that's not even about like any like ideological beliefs that you have. It's maybe why you get up in the morning. It's why are you saving money? Like all of those things, like finding your why will give you that direction and give the ability to portion things out. I am saving $500 because I want to buy a shotgun, and I'm saving $20,000 because I want to put a down payment on a house. I am going to the gym because I want to have mobility into my old age so I can play with my grandkids. You have to find your why throughout every aspect of your life.
Tell this guy's an Army officer. Start with why. Simon Sinek, required reading.
I've actually never read that book. Proud to say.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining us today at Weights and Wealth. And don't forget to apply today's lessons to live healthy and wealthy.
If this conversation will contribute to your fitness and financial gains, please share it with a friend or family member and give a 5-star review so more people can lift bigger weights and get bigger bank accounts.